Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, going pretty well, Aaron. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Well, we're going to do a complete change. We've been talking about pensions for some time, naturally throughout our SMSF Pensions Masterclass. But the other area that you've been spending a lot of time on, both in the delivery of presentations, but also through our technical support service, is around in-house assets, related party acquisitions, that sort of broad area. And it is an area that people can somewhat get stumped on. And we're not necessarily going to spend time looking at the in-house asset rules itself, but really more to the point of trying to understand the requirements around the 5% threshold and those three limbs effectively that we need to be considering. So can I get you to share with people some of that insight into the way in which we need to look at that 5% threshold for the in-house asset rules?
Yeah, so the three limbs that you allude to there are effectively two are acquisition-based limbs, and then the third one is a 30 June limb, and that is that obviously when we're looking at acquiring in-house assets, so in-house assets that meet the definition of an in-house asset, there is a restriction that the acquisition cannot exceed 5%. So the value of that asset cannot exceed 5% of the value of the fund asset. So that's limb number one. That's the obvious one for anyone that's going to look to acquire an in-house asset for the first time. Then if we're looking to acquire additional in-house assets, there is a second limb, which is that the acquisition of those additional in-house assets, the number will clearly have to be less than 5% because the total in-house assets at acquisition can't exceed 5%. So you have to look at the previous one and then look at the current one and make sure that when you acquire the new asset, it doesn't put your total in-house assets over 5%. And then the final one, which is ultimately the ongoing in-house asset test, which is an annual requirement, is to ensure that at 30th of June every year, the total value of your in-house assets is below that 5% threshold. So ensuring that you have not exceeded that 5% for the total of your in-house assets versus the remainder of the fund assets.
Yeah, so to that extent, I guess we get to the point where Section 82 sets out the parameters of what we must do where we get to the situation where our in-house asset levels exceed 5% at the end of the income year. So effectively, we have a triggering of that Section 82, and we therefore have a requirement to set out a written plan by the end of that following income year. So can I get you to kind of elaborate then on what steps that need to take place?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the regulations are quite clear. It's that the regulations require the trustees to prepare a plan, but then the regulations basically tell you what that plan needs to be anyhow, and that is that you need to reduce by the end of the following year the level of in-house assets below 5% by way of disposal. So it actually stipulates that you've got to sell down those in-house assets to reduce the level to below 5%. Now, you'll note that I highlighted or indicated by the end of the next financial year. This is often an issue that is raised by trustees, because if they're not completing their fund audit until, say, May or that sort of time at the end of the year, then they've literally got a month to act. Realistically, what the regulator is looking at in every example that I've ever seen is they're looking for the plan to be prepared, because the non-preparation of the plan is the breach of the legislation, as opposed to the sell down of the investment. So if you have commenced action to sell down that asset, then the ATO will at least be more likely to work with the trustees of the fund to ensure that they follow through on that plan.
So probably a bit more practical here. So where do you see, as we sort of indicated at the beginning here, you've done a lot of training in this space recently. Where do you find professionals tripping up the most when it comes to this area?
Yeah, look, I think it's one of those spaces that whilst I wouldn't use necessarily the terminology tripping up, I think one of the most commonly misunderstood elements of it is, can we do something else to make sure that the level of that 5% goes below 5%? So can we top up the fund in some other way? Can we bring other investments in? Can we make contributions? So can we do that to get our in-house asset level below the 5%? And there's obviously one little, so that the short answer to that is no. There's a caveat to that we had times like COVID where ultimately the commissioner turned a blind eye to the 5% test and said, measure it, note it, but don't do anything about it. And then that was removed once the COVID relief was removed. But the other thing that I would say is that once you've hit 30 June with more than 5%, that's when you have to implement the plan. That's when you have to prepare the plan and look to implement it. But what I think I've suggested, certainly in numerous sessions that I've run in this space, is the alternative is to not wait until 30 June to review your in-house asset valuation. It's to review those valuations sort of immediately prior to 30th of June to see whether or not there is a likelihood of it encroaching on that 5%, and then potentially look at the capacity to make contributions prior to 30 June to ensure that the in-house asset level is at or below that 5% limit.
Yeah, and this is, I guess, why we look at the importance of timing of market valuations as well. So the fact that we know the ATO has been very clear on the fact that we need to value to market each year, but when is the timing of that valuation being done? And again, in that lead up to 30 June, as part of understanding how that 5% of the fund assets threshold will work, is naturally going to play a crucial role in determining whether you may have a breach there or not. So I guess, Tim, the last thing I wanted to comment on there is that we now have our technical support service as part of our product line at Smarter SMSF. So this is, I guess, some of the common stuff that we get asked in respect to helping professionals out there sort of work through and navigate some technical complexities. So what would you say to those that might be interested in finding out more about our support services?
Yeah, certainly. Look, what I'd say is get in contact with us, ask us questions. If you see us at a seminar, a presentation, or we're only a phone call away or an email away, find out what we're willing to, or not willing, but what we're able to help with. Obviously, you and I can't provide financial advice, and that's not what we're here to do. It's really about assisting with those, I guess, more complex compliance issues to ensure that a fund meets its compliance obligations, whether it's structural, whether it's investment based, whether it's benefit or contribution based, just helping people understand how the rules work. That's what we want to use our support service for.
Yeah, and I would say effectively we're trying to sort of put a rudder back on the boat for you. Some people might not have that technical support available to them, and whether it's around property or pensions or contributions or investment rules and restrictions, our technical support service is there to obviously help you to navigate your way through the expertise that we provide at Smarter SMSF. So you can go onto our website, smartersmsf.com/support to find out more. Thanks again, Tim, for your time today.
No worries, Aaron. Look forward to next week.
Thanks, everyone. Once again, bye for now.